Good evening, I'm Hari Srinivasan. Judy Woodruff is away. On the NewsHour tonight, Facebook under fire. A data firm linked to the Trump campaign exploits millions of users' personal information during the presidential election. Then, the latest on Congress's massive spending bill. Lawmakers push to avert another government shutdown as disputes carry negotiations to the 11th hour. And surviving Boko Haram. Two women describe the horrors of living under the insurgent group's control and their harrowing escape.
I never thought I could escape, but it was the best thing to do at that moment because I was 9 months pregnant. I felt I may die in the process of giving birth, so I better die while escaping.
All that and more on tonight's PBS NewsHour. The investigation of apparent serial bombings in Texas shifted today. There had already been 4 bombings in Austin that killed 2 people. Overnight, a package exploded at a FedEx shipping center just outside of San Antonio. One worker suffered minor injuries, and the site was cordoned off for a painstaking all-day search.
We're still searching the packages and all to ensure that there is no other devices there. So we're asking people to just be patient, and if they know of something, definitely call your local FBI, your local ATF, or your local police department and report it. We need the public's help right now.
The package was sent from Austin to an address in Austin. The investigation now includes more than 500 law enforcement officials. A high school in Great Mills, Maryland is the latest to suffer a fatal shooting. A 17-year-old boy with a handgun wounded 2 other students today. Then he was fatally shot in a confrontation with a deputy stationed at the school. One victim, a girl, was in critical condition. The local sheriff said it appears she previously had a relationship with the shooter. President Trump called Russian President Vladimir Putin today to congratulate him on his re-election. The White House said he did not ask Putin about Russia's meddling in the 2016 U.S. election. Mr. Trump confirmed the call as he met with the Saudi Crown Prince. He said a face-to-face meeting may be coming.
We had a very good call, and I suspect that we'll probably be meeting in the not-too-distant future to discuss the arms race, which is getting out of control. But we will never allow anybody to have anything even close to what we have, and also to discuss Ukraine and Syria and North Korea and various other things.
Republican Senator John McCain criticized the call. He said in a statement, an American president does not lead the free world by congratulating dictators on sham elections. The Senate Intelligence Committee is calling for major new efforts to block Russian meddling in the midterm elections this fall. Republicans and Democrats on the panel urged a series of measures today. They include updating election equipment and improving communications between U.S. intelligence agencies and states, among other things. 23 Russian diplomats left Britain today, expelled over the poisoning of a former Russian double agent. Vans carrying the diplomats and their families departed from the Russian embassy in London for flights back to Moscow. The British said they are, in fact, spies. Russia has denied trying to kill Sergei Skripal and his daughter with a nerve agent, and it has, in turn, expelled 23 British diplomats. In China, President Xi Jinping sounded warnings today to opponents at home and abroad. He told the National Congress that Chinese citizens must follow the absolute, unquestioned leadership of the Communist Party. And he told Taiwan not to formally declare independence.
Safeguarding national sovereignty and territorial integrity is the common aspiration of all sons and daughters of the Chinese nation. It is also in the fundamental interest of the Chinese nation. Any actions and tricks to split China are doomed to fail and will face the condemnation of the people and the punishment by history.
Xi's tough talk comes days after the rubber stamp parliament abolished term limits, effectively allowing him to rule indefinitely. Back in this country, new legal action involving President Trump. Former Playboy model Karen McDougal says she had an affair with Mr. Trump. Now she's suing to void a deal with the National Enquirer. She says the tabloid paid $150,000 for her story in 2016, but never ran it. And a judge in New York ruled that Summer Zervos, a former contestant on The Apprentice, may continue her defamation suit against the president. Mr. Trump has said her claim that he groped her is fiction. A federal judge in Mississippi has temporarily blocked the state's new law banning abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy. The governor signed the measure into law yesterday, and the state's sole abortion clinic quickly filed suit. Today's ruling suspends the new law until the case is decided. On Wall Street today, stocks made back some of Monday's losses. The Dow Jones Industrial Average gained 116 points to close at 24,727. The Nasdaq rose 20 points, and the S&P 500 added 4. Billionaire and former Commerce Secretary Peter G. Peterson died today. He worked in the Nixon cabinet and became a leading voice for entitlement reform. He also co-founded Blackstone Group, one of the world's largest private equity firms. Pete Peterson was 91 years old. And the last male northern white rhino has died of old age at a conservancy in Kenya. The 45-year-old animal named Sudan was euthanized Monday. Scientists hope his stored semen can be used in the 2 surviving females and save the subspecies from extinction. The rhinos have fallen prey to warring armies in their African habitat and to poachers. Still to come on the News Hour, privacy concerns raised after a company collects data from 50 million unwitting Facebook users. Congress races toward another deadline to pass a spending bill, an abortion case before the Supreme Court, and much more. Facebook has been a powerhouse and a corporate giant for years now. Tonight, it's facing criticism and concerns about privacy and security at a whole new level. The company is pointing fingers at the political firm Cambridge Analytica for misusing its data. That firm suspended its CEO Alexander Nix today. But Facebook's own decisions around safeguarding data and other recent scandals are front and center as the company takes on its own reviews of what went wrong. John Yang begins with this report.
Growing questions and criticism swirled around Facebook in the United States and Britain today as officials questioned how data was used to influence elections. The British-based research firm Cambridge Analytica has been accused of harvesting data from more than 50 million Facebook users starting in 2014 and misleading Facebook about it. Through an outside researcher, Cambridge Analytica paid Facebook users to take a personality quiz and download an app that collected information from their profiles and their Facebook friends. Then Cambridge Analytica was hired by the Trump campaign for the 2016 presidential election.
Have you met Mr. Trump? Many times.
Today, Britain's Channel 4 News broadcast exclusive, secretly filmed video of Alexander Nix, the firm's now suspended CEO, discussing their work.
We did all the research, all the data, all the analytics, all the targeting. We ran all the digital campaign, the television campaign, and our data informed all the strategy.
In another video, Nix belittled the House Intelligence Committee members he met with in 2017.
I went to speak to them,
Yeah.
and the Republicans asked 3 questions, 5 minutes, done. And the Democrats asked 2 hours of questions.
And you have to answer everything.
No, it's voluntary, but I did because I'm trying to help them.
Right,
We have no secrets.
right,
They're politicians, they're not technical.
right.
They don't understand how it works. They don't understand because the candidate is never involved. He's told what to do by the campaign team.
The furor began over the weekend after a former Cambridge Analytica employee, Chris Wiley, said the company used the information to influence voters' behavior. Yesterday, he spoke with NBC News' Today program.
This data was used to create profiling algorithms that would allow us to explore mental vulnerabilities of people and then map out ways to inject information into different streams or channels of content online so that people started to see things all over the place that may or may not have been true.
The New York Times reported that for as long as 2 years, Facebook failed to inform users whose data had been taken. Facebook has pushed back, saying the claim that this is a data breach is completely false. The company said that users chose to share the information. It's also hired auditors to make sure that the data has been destroyed as Cambridge Analytica promised. In now deleted tweets, the company's chief security officer, Alex Stamos, admitted a researcher lied about how the data would be used. According to the Times, Stamos plans to leave Facebook later this year. The social media giant was already facing pressure over the use of its platform to spread Russian misinformation during the 2016 election. Today, the White House stopped short of calling for Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg to testify before Congress.
Without knowing the specifics, it's difficult to talk about whether an individual should testify, but we do support the privacy of American citizens.
But some, including Connecticut Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal, took a more aggressive stance.
Privacy is clearly at risk in America, and Mark Zuckerberg ought to be before the Judiciary Committee in public under oath to explain how 50 million Americans and others were put at risk and still have no notice of who they are so that they can better secure themselves.
This afternoon, the House Energy and Commerce Committee said it will hear from Facebook representatives tomorrow. And the Federal Trade Commission is reportedly opening an investigation. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm John Yang.
For more on this, I'm joined by Roger McNamee. He was one of Facebook's original investors and a mentor to its founder and CEO, Mark Zuckerberg. He's now the co-founder of Elevation Partners, a private equity firm in California, and co-founder of the Center for Humane Technology. Roger, one of the things that the company has said today is that the entire company is outraged and we were deceived. Yet you were pointing out some things similar to this before the election in 2015 to Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg. What were they?
So beginning in 2016, I started to see things going on the Facebook platform that suggested that bad actors were taking the tools created for advertisers and using them to harm innocent people. And I saw it in several different areas. Politics was one, but also in housing and in some areas related to civil rights. And I raised the issue in October of 2016 with Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg. And I said, guys, I think there's a systemic problem here. I wasn't surprised that they didn't jump right on it. But I was disappointed because they treat it like a public relations problem rather than a business problem. And so I spent 3 months trying to persuade them before I realized that they were just determined to hide behind the legal notion that they were a platform, not a media company, and therefore not responsible for what third parties did.
But you're saying something fundamentally is wrong with the business if this is the output.
Well, indeed, all of this is traced to the business model. The incentives created by an advertising business model are to essentially addict people psychologically to your product and then to cause outrage cycles. You want to feed them stuff that either makes them afraid or angry, because when they're excited by low-level emotions like that, they share more stuff, they're more active, they spend more time on the site and see more ads. They're just more valuable to them. And Facebook turned that into a fine art. And if you think about politics, some campaigns are full of outrage and other campaigns are not. And I saw this in Brexit, which was the British campaign to leave the European Union, where one side was totally about outrage. And they won because Facebook.
We're not necessarily the customers as users. The customers of Facebook are the advertisers.
That's right.
So is there kind of an inherent tension or a conflict there on what we get from the convenience of being part of this community and perhaps all of the good in finding people that we care about in kinship groups and so forth, and the fact that we are the product at the end of the day that is being packaged and sold?
Ari, that is such an important point. I love Facebook. I love the way it allows me to stay in touch with people. I have a rock and roll band. I communicate with our fans over Facebook. The problem is that the advertising business model, as implemented by Facebook today, creates incentives to do things that undermine all of the good. And as we're seeing with Cambridge Analytica, Facebook has made some choices where they were operating under a consent decree with the Federal Trade Commission, where they were supposed to make sure that they had affirmative knowledge and support for any sharing that they did of people's information. And between 2011, when they signed consent decree, and 2014, they had many, many applications that harvested data, apparently in contravention of the consent decree, including the one that Cambridge Analytica caused.
All right, so if you had their ear now, what do you want them to do?
The first thing I want them to do is to cooperate with the investigators. Let's make sure we know everything that happened in 2016. Then secondly, I want them to reach out to the 126 million people on Facebook and 20 million people on Instagram who were touched by the Russian interference and explain what happened and say, this is a foreign country. They're interfering in our most basic democratic process. And the only way we as citizens can fight back is if we vote. We may not like the candidates. They may not be perfect for us, but the only way to prevent interference is to recognize that the people interfering are trying to suppress our vote. They're trying to make us angry at democracy, and we can't let them do that.
So what can we actually do? I mean, there's been this idea that, oh, well, you can just get off Facebook. I mean, that's
not realistic for most people.
Right? So for most people, this is part of their community now and part of how they integrate. And even if I was to take myself off, there's so much data coming from my friends that I can kind of be interpolated or triangulated.
So my basic advice to people is to recognize that there are a lot of people on Facebook who are trying to bait you, to get you angry, to get you emotionally engaged so that you will spend more time on there. But more importantly, they're trying to make you, in politics, feel bad about the political system in the United States. They're trying to make you angry about things like whether it's vaccination or whether it's contrails or whether it's Pizzagate. They're creating all of these phony issues. And I just think people need to recognize that the sources on social media are terrible. And we should recognize that things like NewsHour or the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, those are good sources, and that's where people should try to get informed.
All right, Roger McNamee, also in the interest of full disclosure, you are not in a short position. You're still long on Facebook.
I am still an investor, so I got creamed with everybody else.
All right, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
As Congress negotiates a $1.3 trillion government spending bill before a Friday night deadline, a local transportation project in New York and New Jersey is causing a major holdup in the process. David Cruz of member station NJTV starts our coverage.
When Sandy, a once-in-a-lifetime superstorm, slammed into New York and New Jersey in 2012, it caused historic damage to the region's infrastructure, including the Hudson River tunnels. But even before Sandy struck, Amtrak, whose critical Northeast corridor service from D.C. to Boston is dependent on the aging infrastructure, had begun planning for the Gateway Project, a $29 billion plan to replace the existing tunnels and the Portal Bridge over the Hackensack River, which feeds almost 500 trains into and out of those tunnels every day. Leaders from New York, New Jersey, and the Obama administration all agreed to share the cost of the project. Late last year, a bipartisan show of support as leaders broke ground on the $1.5 billion Portal Bridge project.
1, 2, 3.
But soon thereafter, it all began to fall apart. No one is exactly sure why. Most speculate a personal feud with Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. But the president announced in December that he would not support funding for Gateway, and the $900 million down payment became a sticking point in the current omnibus spending bill negotiations. Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao pushed back against lawmakers, trying to pin the administration down on funding.
A campaign is being waged in the public arena to bully the department, to pressure the federal government to fund these projects. There is a process.
You think the Gateway Project is a good idea?
We are not arguing about whether this project should go forward.
New Jersey Senator Cory Booker says it could lead to an economic cataclysm if one or both of the current tunnels has to be taken out of service.
If this is if the country is the body, the jugular vein when it comes to transportation is the Northeast corridors right here running through our state. To sever the jugular here would cause undue damage to the entire country.
Last Friday, the Portal Bridge got stuck again, causing massive hours-long rush hour backups of New Jersey Transit and Amtrak trains. For supporters of the project, and that's all of New Jersey's Republican congressmen, including the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, Rodney Frelinghuysen, it was right on cue. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm David Cruz in Kearny, New Jersey.
The Gateway Project is just one sticking point in the frantic negotiations on Capitol Hill as lawmakers scramble to avert a third government shutdown this year. Lisa Desjardins has been following the negotiations, joins me now. Let's talk big picture. Omnibus, we hear it every once in a while.
Right.
What is it? Why does it matter?
All right, first of all, this is a monster bill that I think has been off the radar, probably because Congress makes it seem very complicated, but actually it's very simple. So here we go. Let's do an Omnibus Appropriations 101, Hari. Omnibus, it's a noun from Latin. It's basically a sweeping bill. It combines every congressional spending bill in one. Now, this year's bill is expected to be $1.2 trillion with a T dollars. And Hari, it's important especially because this is going to include a large spending increase, one of the largest in recent times. And more than anything, also, Hari, this bill is seen as possibly, very probably, the last major bill this Congress will pass. It's only March, but that means if you want to get anything else done, people are trying to stack it into this bill.
Well, big, complicated things like immigration. We even saw a roundtable today about sanctuary cities. They were trying to figure out if there was legislation they could get into this.
That's right. As late as this weekend, Hari, the president was trying to get a deal over DACA and his border wall into this bill. He wanted border wall money in exchange for a temporary DACA fix. Democrats say that's not good enough, and it looks like neither of those things will be in this bill. That means DACA could remain in limbo for quite some time.
What else is at stake?
Right. Let's talk about guns. That's a very important topic, especially right now. There is a bill called Fix NICS that would shore up the current background check system. It has 76 sponsors in the Senate. The Republicans wanted that in this omnibus bill, but right now it's on the ropes. It's not clear it will go in because conservatives want other things as well on guns. How about also health care? Many Republicans, in a bipartisan effort, want to try and bring back those subsidies for insurers and insurance that they think will stabilize the market. That's something on the table right now, but also looks like it might not make the bill because of a debate over abortion and how those subsidies pay for or don't pay for abortion coverage. So take guns and also health care. If they don't make this bill, those are two issues that may not see the light of day again this year.
What about how agencies are funded? Is this part of it?
Right. That's a huge, huge issue. In fact, this will be one of the largest spending increases, as I said, that we've seen in years. So who gets that money? Which agencies and what do they use it for? Some of it is, we know, $6 billion for opioids, for the opioid crisis. Where does that go exactly? We're waiting to find out. And then will any agencies see cuts even in this year of a spending increase? Republicans want to cut some things.
Yeah.
We don't know because, Hari, we still haven't seen the bill.
So let's talk a little bit about timeline here.
Yeah.
Who's going to get to see? Who knows what's in the bill now, and who will know what's in it by the time they actually pull?
I'm going to check my phone and see what emails I've gotten in the last 2 minutes, because there was a meeting at 1 o'clock today among staffers for the big four leaders in Congress. They've been meeting since 1. They haven't finished meeting. That is the only group that knows what's in this bill, including chairmen and chairwomen of these committees don't know what's decided yet. So right now, they're trying to finalize the outstanding issues, some of which we just talked about. They want to do it by midnight tonight. That would allow the House to live by its own rules and vote Thursday. They like to have technically 3 days to vote. But right now, Hari, very few people know what's in this bill, and we're sort of in the outer zones. It's a massive bill, still not written.
So really, the only time that legislators are going to be informed on this is, let's say, sometime before midnight tonight, when it hits the system. They're going to have to read what
1,000 pages?
1,000 pages, figure out if they're for it or against it,
Right.
or we head toward another government shutdown?
Well, there is a that's right. They need to get this bill done by Friday night, and that's when the government funding would run out. That's possible. Senate House votes Thursday, Senate Friday. If they can't make it, they will pass probably another short-term spending bill and maybe work this weekend. But it's very much a matter of stay tuned.
All right, Lisa Desjardins, thanks so much.
Sure thing.
Stay with us. Coming up on the News Hour, an Ohio school that's taking steps to keep chronically absent students in the classroom, and the harrowing story of 2 Nigerian women who survived being kidnapped by the militant group Boko Haram. But first, abortion and free speech collide at the Supreme Court today. William Brangham takes a look at arguments made before the 9 justices this morning.
The case before the court involves so-called crisis pregnancy centers. These are clinics run by anti-abortion groups, and whether a California law can require those centers to more fully disclose what they are and what services they do and do not offer. Marcia Coyle was in the courtroom for today's arguments. She is chief Washington correspondent of the National Law Journal. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Great. So tell us a little bit more. What is this case all about?
This is a First Amendment claim that was brought by an organization that represents many of these crisis pregnancy centers. And they are contending that under the First Amendment, these notices amount to compelled speech, that they are being compelled to speak a message that is against their religious beliefs or their beliefs, period, about abortion. The law itself provides notice, would require them to provide notices of a range of services, not just abortion, family planning, contraception, prenatal care, and abortion services. They raised their challenge in the lower federal courts. They lost, and they are the challengers who brought the case to the Supreme Court today for the oral arguments.
So the law in California said that if someone walks into a crisis pregnancy center, which have been accused of sometimes misleading people into thinking you might be getting birth control or abortion-related services, the law says you have to say to people, we don't have medical doctors here, or you have to tell them, if you do want an abortion, there are services provided by the state of California, and that's what they object to.
There are really two types of notices, one for unlicensed centers. They simply have to say that they are not licensed medical facilities and they have no licensed medical provider on the premises to supervise what they're doing. If you're a licensed center, then you have to provide a notice that says there are low-cost, free family planning, abortion, prenatal care, contraception services available, and include a phone number that would allow the woman to access those services.
So the state of California is saying this is just, in essence, truth in advertising, that if you walk into a center, you should know what you're getting when you go into that place.
Absolutely. In fact, the state feels that it's filling an information gap. The state has been expanding its healthcare services and claims that there are a large number of low-income pregnant women who aren't aware of the services that they can get for free or at low cost if they're eligible. They don't see this as targeting crisis pregnancy centers, although the centers feel that they are being targeted.
And what was your sense from listening to the arguments today, how the justices came down on this?
My sense was that many of the justices seemed to be leaning against the law. Almost all of them voiced some concerns, some more substantial than others. For example, Justice Alito said that the law has so many exemptions that when you finally put aside all the exemptions, the only ones who seem suspiciously to be targeted are these anti-abortion centers. Justices Sotomayor and Kennedy raised some concerns about even the unlicensed center notice, that if you advertise as an unlicensed center, you have to put in large print that you are not a licensed medical facility, and you have to put that in 13 different languages. At the same time, Justice Sotomayor said that she had gone on the web to look at some of these centers to see how they advertise. And even though these unlicensed centers claim they do not provide medical services, she said some of them are showing women in nurses' uniforms in front of ultrasound machines in an examining room, which could be quite misleading. On the other hand, Justice Kagan pointed out that what California's law here is doing is almost the flip side of what the Supreme Court has said states can require doctors who perform abortions to say to their clients. She noted that some of the statements that states require those doctors to give to women have virtually nothing to do with the abortion procedure itself. Picking up on that, Justice Breyer said, well, you know, in the law, what is sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander.
In other legal news today, a defamation suit that was brought by a former contestant of The Apprentice, this was Donald Trump's former show, has tried to sue the president for defamation. A court in New York ruled that because he is president doesn't mean he doesn't get out of this potential case. Explain what happened.
Well, it seems to me that what happened here is the president's lawyers We're relying on a Supreme Court decision, Clinton v. Jones.
The famous Clinton v. Jones.
Yes, and oddly enough, that case would really seem to work against the president because the Supreme Court held that President Clinton could be sued for sexual harassment, claimed by Paula Jones. But the court did not the court explicitly said that it was not deciding whether a suit in state court could go forward. It was only addressing, this was a suit against the President Clinton that was brought in federal court. And so I think the Trump administration or President Trump's lawyers are relying on that opening in that decision to carry forward and probably with an appeal. But the New York State Court ruling today was basically on the Supremacy Clause, saying that nobody is above the law, and so this suit could go forward in state court. So we'll have to see what happens next.
Marcia Coyle, as always, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Missing a day of school here, 2 days there may not seem like a big deal. But before long, those days add up, and students aren't learning, and they're struggling to keep up academically. 7 million children in the U.S. are considered chronically absent. That means missing 10% of the school year. States are beginning to take the problem seriously. For the last few years, schools in Cleveland, Ohio have made a big effort to encourage students to get to class every day. Special correspondent Kavitha Cardoza with our partner Education Week found steady progress there, but also a long way to go. For our weekly segment, Making the Grade.
Good morning.
It's 7 o'clock in Cleveland, Ohio, and it's dark, cold, and snowing. The kind of day when it's difficult to get out the door.
Snow is real hard.
But Amanda Watkins prides herself on her daughter's perfect school attendance.
I can't miss a day. It's my perfect attendance, not even hers.
In Cleveland Public Schools, though, that kind of attendance record is not typical. A couple of years ago, school system leaders found more than half their 40,000 students were chronically absent. The problem starts as early as kindergarten.
Ooh, careful now.
Principal Brittany Anderson at Patrick Henry School greets every child as they come in. And their parents.
Well, we appreciate you all for making sure they're safe. A lot of parents expressed that they didn't feel welcomed in the school in prior years.
So once a week, she sets out coffee and pastries.
And at first, it was just a way to get them in. But then the coffee clubs turned into a way for the parents to talk to the teachers. That way we can have these conversations with our parents without it feeling formal.
Diamond Godonsky has 3 kids in the school. She appreciates the warm welcome.
When, you come in and you see smiling, friendly faces with stuff to give to you, hot treats or whatever, it makes you feel good.
All right, SPO meeting tomorrow.
Anderson says building good relationships with parents makes it more likely they'll bring their children to school, even on a day like today.
If our scholars are not here, then they're not learning.
Students who miss a lot of school are more likely to drop out. Robert Balfance, a researcher with Johns Hopkins University, found a direct link between attendance and academics in Florida.
Essentially, we found that each additional day of missed schooling, students had 1 fewer point on the state test. So miss 10 days, lose 10 points, miss 15 days, lose 15 points.
But because schools used to track attendance differently, Balfance says until recently, states didn't even realize there was a problem.
Traditionally, schools have measured average daily attendance, which is how many kids on average are in the building on a given day. And except in the most extreme cases, that's almost always in the 90s. And we're hardwired to think 90A, good. But it turns out that you could have average daily attendance in the low 90s and still have a quarter of your kids missing a month or more of school.
Chronic absenteeism affects all students, says Hedy Chang with the nonprofit Attendance Works.
A teacher now is faced with the choice of repeating lessons or keeping going on for the kids who have been there. And that churn slows down the ability of the entire classroom to move forward.
A new federal education law signed into effect by former President Barack Obama goes into effect this year. Now, all states will be required to track chronic absenteeism. It's typically considered missing 18 school days or more. But Cleveland leaders found even missing 1 day a month made a difference. So they started a public relations blitz. The slogan, "Get to school, you can make it," was on billboards, posters, magnets, t-shirts, even grocery store bags. Everyone helped staff a daily phone bank. Board members, principals, bus drivers. They made 16,000 calls the first year.
The reason for the call is Jalen has missed 4 more days of school, and good attendance helps.
Keisha Bullard is a kindergarten teacher.
Is there anything that we can do to assist you? In the past hour, for instance, I think that I've dialed maybe 20 numbers, 30 numbers.
Low-income families in particular face many challenges.
With the weather being like it is asthma. Most of the time it is transportation or illness issues.
Laurie Hobson, who's in charge of attendance for the district, found lots of kids miss school simply because they don't have clean clothes.
We provide uniforms to any family who needs a uniform, and what we discovered was attendance improves for as much as 6 weeks after receiving a uniform.
Cleveland schools partner with several organizations to help provide families with everything from a bus pass to emergency shelter to legal help. This makes sense, Chang says, because the school district can't solve deeper social problems on its own.
When you have high levels of chronic absence, often it means that there are these bigger challenges, and you really need to have a community approach to address it.
In Cleveland, it's an all-out effort. A community college offers scholarships as incentive, local businesses check attendance before hiring, and the Cleveland Browns players visit schools regularly.
Whenever you're late, that means you don't have respect for the other person's time. In the NFL, you get fined. So I think our fine, if you miss a meeting, might be like $10,000.
Welcome, everyone. We have a full agenda, so I'm not going to.
Some districts do use punishments such as fines, jail time, and taking away driver's licenses. But Cleveland schools have found focusing on positive messages far more effective.
We show up every day and associate Cleveland students, even when it's cold outside. Get to school, Cleveland. We know you can make it.
In the last 2 years, Cleveland's chronic absenteeism rate has dropped from 50 to 30%. At Cleveland High School for Digital Arts, Principal Jasmine Mays and a local radio celebrity are hosting a surprise celebration because students have made their attendance goal.
You never know when DJ Incognito's going to show up and just come and throw us a party.
Ninth grade is another year when students are most likely to miss school, but today everyone is glad they're here.
That's actually the icing on the cake, Z107.9 being here.
It's cool because it brings everybody together, you know, like it's something unexpected.
I think it motivates kids to come to school because they don't want to miss cool stuff like this.
Eric Gordon is the CEO of Cleveland Schools. He says they've moved from rewarding perfect attendance to recognizing students who come to school regularly. Someone watching might say, really, a party just for coming to school? Like, isn't that what kids are supposed to do?
Well, yes, it is what kids are supposed to do. I would challenge people to look at their own workplace environments, though, where companies give bonuses for all kinds of things, including high attendance, where they have parties for their staff for performing well. I mean, incentive is part of how you create behaviors.
In Cleveland, thousands more children now attend classes regularly, but a third of the district is still missing 18 days or more of school, and Gordon says it'll continue to take a lot of effort. For PBS NewsHour and Education Week, I'm Kavita Cardoza in Cleveland, Ohio.
Well, an update to our education story from a couple of weeks ago on the teachers' strike in West Virginia. It ended after more than a week, but our colleagues at Education Week report that emboldened teachers to push for pay raises in other states, including Oklahoma, Arizona, and Kentucky. In Oklahoma, there could be a walkout in early April. Boko Haram has cut an infamous and deadly reputation for itself in Nigeria, and a particularly cruel tactic of the Islamist militant group is every parent's worst fear, the kidnapping and killing of children. In a moment, you'll hear testimonials from 2 young women who survived that experience, but first, some background on the group and the fight against it. Boko Haram's near-decade-long campaign of terror and violence has killed tens of thousands and displaced 2 million people. Their main focus? To overthrow Nigeria's government and establish an Islamic State that forbids Western-style political and social activity. Boko Haram translates to Western education is forbidden. The group has carried out attacks in Cameroon, Niger, and Chad, all from its base in remote northeastern Nigeria. Since 2009, the militants have terrorized Africa's most populous country with bombings, assassinations, and abductions. Just last month, an ISIS-affiliated faction of Boko Haram kidnapped 110 girls from a boarding school in northeast Nigeria, some as young as 11 years old. Last week, the Nigerian government shuttered boarding schools in the northeastern state and sent drones and jets to search for the girls. Boko Haram often marries the captives off to fighters. They've also been used as suicide bombers. In 2014, the militants abducted nearly 300 students from a school in the village of Chibok, prompting an international campaign to free them. More than 50 girls escaped. About 100 more were freed last year after the Nigerian government paid a nearly $4 million ransom. Some had been forced to convert to Islam and sold as sex slaves. They were beaten, starved, and sexually assaulted. Recently, Judy Woodruff sat down with two young women who were abducted in 2014 and escaped. Yakaka was 15 when taken, Hawa 14. They were brought to the U.S. by a nonprofit called Too Young to Wed, dedicated to protecting young girls and ending child marriage. And a warning, their accounts are harrowing and disturbing and will upset many viewers.
Thank you for being here. Yakaka, I'm going to start with you. Tell us what happened to you.
I was living in Boma, my hometown, with my parents without any problems as a student when Boko Haram came and invaded the town. They abducted me from my house along with two of my younger siblings. One, a girl, was 5, then one of my younger brothers, who was 6. They took us to the forest, and up till now, there's no news about them.
And what about your parents?
I am together with my parents.
When they took you away, what happened? How long were you there, and how were you treated?
I had been with them for a long time. We've suffered a lot. It was rough treatment every day. My first husband among the insurgents was one of the people that abducted me. After having sex with me, he would send me out naked into the camp. Other insurgents would drag me and have sex with me. When I returned, he knew exactly that his own fellow insurgents had had sex with me. But he flogged me for wasting time. That was my daily life. I delivered a baby boy before I escaped with 3 other abductees.
Did you believe you would escape when you were being held?
I never thought that I would escape because they took us far into the forest and there was no indication that they would ever take us back into the town.
And Hawa, you were just 14 when you were abducted. Tell us what happened to you and your family.
I lived in Boma along with my parents before the advent of Boko Haram. I was a student going to school, no problem. Boko Haram came and invaded Boma. On the 3rd day of the invasion, a childhood friend to my senior brother, who had joined Boko Haram, led other Boko Haram men to our house looking for my brother. He could not see him, so he said they're going with me to the bush to go and marry me. My father objected. They held him, and in my presence they used a knife to slice his throat and kill him instantly. My stepmother also protested. They also held her and killed her. Fortunately enough, my mother was not at home, so they took me away.
I can't even imagine. And you were held for how long, and how were you treated?
I got pregnant in their custody, and my pregnancy was about 9 months when I escaped. I can't say precisely the amount of months I stayed in their custody. One day I observed they were not paying attention in the night when they were in the mosque. I succeeded in escaping.
Did you believe you would be able to safely escape?
I never thought I could escape, but it was the best thing to do at that moment because I was 9 months pregnant. No support from anywhere, no arrangement to take care of me, nobody to help me out, no experience. I felt I may die in the process of giving birth, so I better die while escaping.
And what has happened to your child?
I escaped from the camp. I was trekking in the bush. On the 7th day, I got to a deserted village where I found an old woman that was there. She saw my condition. She accepted me, kept me in her house. 2 days later, I delivered a baby girl. The old woman helped me. She supported me. After a few days, when I got a little stronger, we resolved that I should leave. Because if the insurgents came to find me in her custody, they will kill both of us. So she showed me the road to Boma. I kept trekking. On the 3rd day in the night, my daughter became ill and she died. At first I thought she was sleeping, but later I realized that her hands became very stiff. You couldn't even move them. Then I knew she was dead. There was a rag donated to me by the old woman. I used it to wrap the corpse. Inside I dug a hole, buried the girl, and proceeded.
I am so sorry. And you were alone through this whole thing, through this journey? And Yakaka, how did you finally escape from Boko Haram?
I joined 3 other ladies to escape along with them because we could not be in the situation. The suffering was becoming too much. So we left the camp in the night when most of the soldiers were sleeping. We escaped through the bush and trekked to Maiduguri. A military truck picked us up and dropped us close to a camp.
I understand you went to a camp or a place for displaced persons, people, and there you were also treated badly. Is that right?
The soldiers that took us in their truck dropped us off at the Lori camp. It was a large camp with a lot of people. The feeding was a problem. You hardly get food to eat. Sometimes I went for 2 days without food. Yes, there were some aid workers that were sharing food, but I never benefited. I watched the Red Cross twice distributing such aid materials, but it got finished before reaching my turn. And another problem we usually had in that camp is that once it was evening, all the aid workers left the camp, leaving us with soldiers and other security agencies. Soldiers went to our various rooms, demanding for sex, and it was better to accept it or you will be intimidated and dealt with. So when I discovered I had left the problem and I had jumped into another problem, I decided to leave the camp to another community, where my child fell ill. And because I had no access to medication, he died. So that was how I lost my son.
Well, we can't even begin to imagine the sadness and the hardship that you've lived through. And I know everyone hearing your story is in awe of you and your strength and being able to tell these stories today in hopes that things will change. Hawa, how have you been treated? How has your life been since you escaped? And how hard is this for you now? Are you able to put that behind you and think about the future?
At the time I escaped and got to Maiduguri, I did not know anyone. I had nobody to stay with. So I went to the host community and stayed with some people. But nobody wanted me around. Nobody was happy that I was living there, because they all call me the ex-wife of Boko Haram. They were calling me names. I had only one dress set. Anytime I wanted to go out or do something, if I wanted to wash my dress, I had to remove my dress, wash it, dry it off, and find somewhere to hide nude until the dress dried off, before I could put it on and leave. Too Young to Wed provided me with dresses and enrolled me in one of the best private schools in Maiduguri, and I became a point of attraction. My status changed, so I had to leave that area that I was living in as a richer person to another part where they do not know much about me. And now they see me as well-to-do in this society, before I reconnected with my mother.
Yakaka, how hard is it for you now, and what do you want to do now? What do you want to do in the future?
My major problem is when I go out in the streets of Maiduguri and I see some survivors that have not been able to access any form of help. They're out of school, they're living wretched. I don't feel happy. I pray that they also get the type of assistance I got. Be in school, change their status, get good dresses, be accepted by the society and whenever they finish school. I'm hoping in my own case, when I finish school, I will come back and assist other growing children from my community that have been neglected. I also want all others to get the same treatment.
Hawa, what do you want Americans to know about the future possibilities for people for young women, for people like you and like Yakaka and other children of Nigeria who've had this terrible thing happen to them, and many of whom are still at risk. What should Americans know? What do you want them to know about the future that you want?
I am pleading with the people of America and the government to please assist us. There are thousands of other children that have no voice, that are abducted in the forests. Nobody is talking of them. Let the U.S. government put pressure where necessary. The government and all the relevant agencies should see that a lot of efforts will be put towards recovering these people, put them in schools, so that they can save my generation.
Finally, let me ask both of you, do you have a good feeling about your own future? Yakaka, do you feel you will be able to fulfill and have the life that you want to have?
Yes, my future is bright. I am a student of Western education, and I know the value of a Western education. Through that, I can have a brighter future.
And Hawa, what about you? What do you think not only the future is for you, but the other young people of Nigeria in the part of the country where you're from?
In my own case, so long as I remain in school, my future is bright. But at the same time, I request that other children should live like me, or even better than me. Let the entire world devise various means of recovering all the kidnapped children, send them to school, and let them develop once more a hope in their lives.
Well, we are moved by your stories. We are very sad with you and the loss of your family members and your loved ones, and we certainly wish for you the very, very best. Thank you for coming and talking with us about what happened.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Amnesty International reported today that the Nigerian security forces were alerted but failed to act last month against Boko Haram militants who were heading to the town of Dapchi. The group kidnapped more than 100 girls there. A Nigerian military spokesman denounced the finding, calling it economical with the truth. Finally tonight, sad news from the NewsHour family. Betty Ann Bowser, longtime correspondent for the PBS NewsHour, died Friday night at her home in Ajic, Mexico. She was 73. Betty Ann was a proud Virginian, starting her career in 1966 at WAVY in the Hampton Roads area. 8 years later, she was working for CBS News during the Walter Cronkite era, eventually becoming the co-anchor of a news magazine program, 30 Minutes.
The recovery is still in its early stages, and
She began filing stories for the NewsHour as a correspondent in 1986, covering stories like the Oklahoma City bombing, 9/11, and a long list of natural disasters. She spent time getting to know victims of those tragedies, and she wasn't afraid to push more well-known public figures for answers, as was the case when she sat down with Donald Trump in 1992.
Are you a Republican or a Democrat?
I'm probably a Republican, but
an
I'm
economic
sort of,
Republican,
yeah,
but a social
maybe.
Democrat?
But I'm really for an individual more than I am for a party.
She always kept digging, asking civil engineers why the levees failed after Hurricane Katrina.
they knowingly built a levee below their own standards in the first place,
And that's correct.
and now they're building it back to what it was before, and it didn't work.
And that's correct.
Shortly before the passage of the Affordable Care Act in 2010, Betty Ann was named health correspondent for the NewsHour. She took viewers to the front lines of the nation's raging healthcare battles and far beyond the Beltway, where she tried to convey the daily challenges Americans face.
If you live in Lambert and you need groceries, your only option is this convenience store.
We'll remember Betty Ann for her tenacity and wit, and for the many complex stories she helped us tell. On the NewsHour online right now, 6 months after Hurricane Maria, whole towns in Puerto Rico still remain without power. But some communities are getting assistance setting up renewable energy sources. Can solar power light up the island's recovery? We explore that and more on our website, pbs.org/newshour. And that's the NewsHour for tonight. I'm Hari Srinivasan. Join us online and again here tomorrow evening for all of us at the PBS.
You're watching PBS.